The controller told us that these objects had been observed for over 2 weeks, coming down from over 80,000 feet, rapidly descending to 20,000 feet, hanging out for hours, and then going straight back up. For those who don't realize, above 80,000 feet is space.
Is there a correlation between any of the characteristics of these UAPs, UFOs?
What we tend to see are the smaller vehicles tend to be, think of a sports car. The large ones tend to be, not always, but almost exclusively either triangular shape or boomerang shape.
Werewolves? I see dead people walking around like regular people. They don't see each other. They only see what they want to see. They don't know they're dead.
The UFO UAP community was fairly surprised. Shocked might be a better word.
If you believe we have crashed craft, stated earlier, do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries. Yeah.
Were they, I guess, human or non-human biologics?
Non-human.
Do you think there is life on other planets?
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I suppose there would be.
Oh, I've seen a flying saucer.
You've seen one?
Yes, definitely. At Lane Cove.
When was this?
1953.
You don't think this is a figment of your imagination?
Several other people with me saw it.
I'm not wishing that all that stay with me.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
There is now a new UFO whistleblower with some major bombshell level statements.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This episode is brought to you by 8 amazing people: Eddie Tabb, Lisa Bowden, Taven Rice, Kelly Lewis, Mecca Mickey, Diane Boss, Jeanette Angel, and Dorothy Hawkins. And a special thank you to all of the subscribers on YouTube and the followers on Spotify. If you wish to support the podcast on YouTube, you can hit that join button below to become an Eyes to That Sky member. Or if you want to join our Patreon or provide other support, the links are below in the show description. But now, on with the show. Welcome to the Michigan UFO Sightings and Paranormal Encounters podcast, where we explore the unexplained and mysterious phenomena that have occurred throughout the state of Michigan and beyond.
From UFO sightings to ghostly encounters, we delve deep into the stories, the evidence, and the theories behind these strange events.
We are your hosts. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Wayne.
We are an educator duo that after an encounter with a triangular UFO in 2018 in Michigan, we decided to investigate UFOs and the paranormal. In this podcast, we will be speaking with eyewitnesses, experts, and researchers to uncover the truth about some of the most intriguing cases of paranormal activity in and around Michigan.
Our goal is not to convince anyone of the existence of these phenomena, but rather to provide a platform for discussion and exploration. So, buckle up and join us on this journey down the paranormal rabbit hole.
On an escalator.
All right. Hello, everybody. We are coming to you live from southeastern Michigan within the shadow of the great Motor City, Detroit, Michigan. As we are tucked away in our little humble abode, we want to welcome everyone to the show. And it's going to be a good show. But today is Sunday, June 30th, 2024, 4th of July week, right? Yeah, Thursday is 4th of July. So we hope everybody's enjoying the summer. And the weather here has been hot, humid, and a lot of rain. And
now today we've got fall temps.
Yeah, exactly. So
Go figure.
Yeah, the weather here in Michigan, we get 4 seasons every day.
As long as it doesn't snow this week, we are good.
Yep. So just a quick shout out. I see we got some people in chat already. So Straw Dog's here. Marcel Gufonian Metalhead is here. Straw Dog, Diane Boss, of course, is here live in chat.
Quiet peeps in chat.
And we got,
right
yes,
now.
of course, we always have our lurkers and people that are watching from beyond. So welcome everybody. Just a couple quick housekeeping tips. Next week, we're going to have a very special guest on. We're going to have metaphysical, spiritual, and cosmic researcher, Constance Victoria Briggs. And she was most recently just on Richard Syrett's show, Strange Planet. And she is asked to come on our show as well. So very happy to have her on. So make sure you come out and join in the conversation. That's going to be a great show. We're going to get into all kinds of things, moon mysteries, all that good stuff.
Also, remember, if you want to if you wish to make a donation to the podcast, you can do so with PayPal, Super Chats, the Buy Us a Coffee, or join the Patreon. All the links can be found below in the show description.
And we love hearing from you guys. So remember, you can email us your UFO sightings, pictures if you want, paranormal stories, encounters, you name it. We'd love to read those little encounters that you guys have, maybe even put them on a show. And you can email us at mi.ufo.podcast@gmail.com.
So remember, we're 5 episodes away from the 100th episode.
Yep, that's not counting the bonus episodes or anything either.
Not including the bonus ones, but we are 5 officially away.
Yep.
So we're still planning that get together at our local New Boston Coney and Grill. So sometime early July. So just stay tuned.
Yeah, which is right around the corner. So
tomorrow.
Yeah.
Tomorrow starts July.
Yeah.
Summer can slow down.
Yep. And then just lastly, just a quick hello once again to everybody who's watching us on X, on YouTube, and we are back on Facebook, our Facebook page. Once again, Instagram did not work out so well. So I'll put shorts and things up like that up on Instagram. But as for doing live streaming to Instagram, it just does not work very well. So we've decided to X, no pun intended, that one out. So, all right, Michelle, why don't you tell us a little bit about our guest?
Right after I get done shaking my head at your joke. It's like one of his dad jokes. All right. So tonight, we have Josh Blaylock. He is a creator of a cult hit supernatural action comic Mercy SPARX, now in development with MGM Studios. He is also the creator of comics The ENCODED and Arkworld. And that's the one that caught Wayne's attention.
Yes,
Josh
absolutely.
Is a veteran comic book writer, artist, and founder of Devil's Due Comics, having published over 1,000 comic books. His nonfiction book on the subject of publishing was made required reading at Savannah College of Art and Design. That is cool.
Yeah.
And he has been featured on NBC, Universal News, Yahoo Finance, and in the New York Times. Several of Josh's plots and character designs have been translated into toys, film, and television. Most recently with the Henry Golding film Snake Eyes, G.I. Joe Origins, and the new G.I. Joe classified Kamakura 6-inch figures. Josh began publishing comics after high school at age 18 and assisted in launching the first 80s retro pop culture clothing line of its kind, kickstarting a nationwide hit. 3 years later, his success relaunching G.I. Joe, Voltron, which is one of my favorites of the 80s, and other classic properties sent ripples through the comic book world that are still felt to this day, paving the way for independent publishers to compete with Marvel and DC by revitalizing major licensed brands. That is cool.
That is cool. All right, everybody, we're going to bring him on. We have Mr. Josh Blaylock. Hey, Josh, how are you, man?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely, man. You've got quite the list of achievements, and sounds like you're very busy with things right now.
I'm good on paper.
Well, why don't we go back and start at the beginning? What first made you interested in getting into comic books?
You know, I always drew from time before I remember. My parents said I just, you know, was like the 2-year-old. You'd sit down and just wanted to draw. And from like a really, my earliest memories are knowing that I wanted to be an animator, but not understanding that word. So then I really wanted to do that until I was about 12. Like felt like I was like born to do that. And then all I was doing was drawing comics, and then that was it. So it wasn't really a matter of like, oh, I think I like this, and maybe that's something it's like, no, I have to do this. And everything else is just sort of like, I'm waiting to get old enough to do this, and waiting to get through school enough to be able to do this. And then, it started writing letters to DC and Marvel, you know, sending my art when I'm like 13 or 12. and then really, I think what pushed it over the edge though was in like I think it was like 91. All these guys, you know, were blowing up. Comic fans know Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, you know, really, really young guys who were, you know, barely 20, just becoming like hit superstars. And then they all left Marvel to start Image Comics, and they all owned their own stuff. And that was just like, that's what I want to do. You know, I went from being like reading everything I could about Walt Disney's, you know, his story and how he built that company and other people like that, to like, okay, now it's like these comic guys are doing it right now. And then, you know, separate from that though, I grew up in the 80s. So, you know, I, just like everyone else, ate, slept, breathed like G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Voltron and all that stuff. And so I started self-publishing comics as soon as I could when I was 18, and getting those distributed to all the stores and driving to whatever Comic-Cons I could get to. There were orders of magnitude less Comic-Cons back then. Yeah, I was just doing it as soon as I could. And then through a longer story of kind of like intro, got into, I worked for a company that I got to play the key part in launching this retro line of clothing that blew up in all the malls and stuff around America. And that taught me what I needed to know to go out on my own and try to get the license. And I snagged the G.I. Joe license. And the reason why I was able to do that was because at this time, everybody thought 80s licenses was a dumb idea. And all the adults in charge, you know, just didn't get it. So a kid like me could go in and scoop it up, you know. And then it was a hit. And that was when after like 6 years of publishing comics, I was able to go professional full time.
Now, was that just the license for the G.I. Joe comic book, or did that include like animation and stuff like that?
Just specifically comic books.
Oh, okay.
Yep. G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, 1980s version comic book license for an absurd royalty I had to pay.
Yeah, I bet.
But yeah, and I partnered with Image Comics on it. My company, Devil's Due, got the license, and then I went, you know, to see like, okay, I'll self-publish this if I have to, but it'd be cool to partner with a bigger publisher. And that's what I did. And so it was really cool getting to take this to this company that was farmed by these guys that, you know, I kind of idolized. And then, you know, but it was funny when I got there, they didn't really know what to make of it either. Because, you know, they're a little older and they're like, okay, I mean, we like that. It was kind of cool. But, you know, they're all like teenagers or 20s by the time we were kids watching Joe, and they just thought, okay, be kind of, you know, so no one really understood what a hit it was going to be and what it would unfold from that. So right after we got G.I. Joe, in between me getting that license and the book coming out, someone else had gotten Transformers, and then like once G.I. Joe was a hit, and then Transformers came right after it, and was an even bigger hit because Transformers has always been a bigger brand. And the retailers were also not going to be taken off guard this time, so they were determined. And then it was just the floodgates open. So then anybody with any muscle, all of a sudden, that had any connections to those properties, like I think it was DC got Thundercats because Warner Brothers indirectly had some kind of tie over that. I think that's right. Everything just came back. He-Man.
Yep.
And what I'm still surprised to see is now, 20 years later, again, 40 years later, the shit is all still popular. So it's not, it hasn't slowed down, and that's what I didn't even see coming.
Well, what I was gonna say there is, I remember growing up in the 70s and 80s, and for me, it was always, as a kid growing up, obviously Transformers. They came a little bit later for me though. G.I. Joe, and then there was Robotech, which I don't hear a lot of people talk about at all, but that was like one of the first major big animes that they used to watch in the morning. And I was like, oh my God, it was a war saga told in space. I don't think it was really made for kids, because there were cartoon people getting blown up and burned in these robotic, exosuits and jets that would turn into robots that they're fighting inside of. They were just like super soldiers, right? And then there was the very first one I remember though that got me interested in some of this stuff was Battle of the Planets with G-Force. And it was a Japanese animation type of thing where it took the five people to make one super awesome cool ship in this case, right? It was kind of like what sparked a little bit of not Transformers, but like Voltron and stuff. And I remember,
Sorry,
go ahead.
There's a name for that whole genre. I think it's Sentai. It's like basically when it's a group of these, like, usually it's uniforms very similar. Type of pilots in Japanese cartoons, and they all pilot some kind of giant robot things, or it's became its own thing. And so Power Rangers falls into that category, and Power Rangers eventually was like by far blew everything else away that had come before it, and still thrives to this day. But yeah, Battle of the Planets was that was a little right before my time, so I didn't like we actually ended up publishing Micronauts, which was in that same era. But I didn't know
I remember
that as
that.
well.
Yep.
It never, they weren't as big because they weren't part of that, what became that first wave of 80s like brilliant evil genius marketing, that were like you wore the pajamas and you had the lunchbox and you had the school Trapper Keeper binder, and then you watched the cartoon and like everything. That right before that, it was just, oh, here's some toys and here's a cartoon maybe. But Alex Ross, who's like one of the most famous comic book artists of all time, and he's this amazing painter, he loved G-Force Battle of the Planets, so he did all of this art for it. And so that was also a huge hit that came out during all of that 80s resurgence in like the early 2000s. It was so it was a whirlwind. And I just now launched a teaser at Joe Fest, which is this G.I. Joe convention. I did G.I. Joe for 7 years. We published it. We published almost as many books as Marvel did in their 12 years. And then I haven't touched it in like 14 years or something. So, because it went to IDW, and then it went to, now it just got IDW, like lost it, and it went to Skybound, which is under Image Comics. It's Robert Kirkman's company, and he's the guy who founded or created The Walking Dead and created Invincible, and he's like a megastar. And now he actually became he's the only person who become a partner who also now owns part of Image. So it's funny that it's back with Image again, but it's all branded as Skybound because he's such a big name. And they've just brought a whole new G.I. Joe thing back. It's doing like incredibly well. And I'm not involved in that, but at Joe Fest, I just dropped a teaser for what's sort of we're going to release more very soon, but I'll say, like, if you like G.I. Joe and if you like stuff like The Boys, Watchmen, and on around, funny enough, Invincible, like deconstruction of some of this phenomena, it's going to be a lot of fun. So, and I'll be doing it for the first time in 20 years with another publisher, because I've been trying to move back into like I've been publishing my whole adult life. I'm really just pushing as a studio now, working with other publishers, and this will be with Massive Publishing.
I wasn't very big into comic books when I was a kid, but I do remember I had friends, and back in the 80s, it was like so taboo to be like a tabletop role player playing Dungeons and Dragons. That genre and doing that kind of stuff that was long-haired devil worshiping kids, casting spells and all this stuff.
Satanic Panic.
Yeah, the Satanic Panic and the stuff that happened at Michigan State, which a lot of it is all garbage, Mazes and Monsters with Tom Hanks and all that stuff. A lot of that is all fabricated. But it's like that did not take off. I mean, that, the other stuff, kind of took off, the anime and things like that. But now you look at like Dungeons and Dragons is in Stranger Things. I mean, it just happened to finally get into like certain aspects now, and everybody knows if you say, "Oh man, you rolled a 20 on that 20-sider," everybody knows you're talking about something to do with Dungeons and Dragons because they've seen it, or now everybody plays it. You can go to all these comic book stores and they got rooms now where people are playing it. And it's like, man, I used to have people coming from churches coming to me and my friends being like, "You're doing that devil thing with those evil dice."
And you're all sitting there like 12-year-olds or like 15-year-olds. You're like, and then you're like, if you knew what we're doing, this is the dorkiest thing you could imagine. And you guys are coming in and calling us like devil worshippers.
Yeah.
And now it's now, yeah, I mean, it really blew up in the last decade.
Yeah. It's especially online.
A huge percentage of, really like millennials, I'd say, kind of really push that trend up. And it's just like it's like having a board game night now. And actually, it's funny enough, I ended up getting the license to the Dungeons and Dragons properties just because of the relationship with Hasbro.
Okay.
Because I did, even though I didn't have the Transformers license, I had a temporary one where we did a G.I. Joe versus Transformers crossover, and then the guys doing Transformers, they got a temporary Joe license so they could do their version, and then we did but then we did Forgotten Realms and Dragonlance in Eberron, but they would not let us do any original content, so it could only be adaptations. So we did all of the Drizzt novels by R.A. Salvatore. We turned those into graphic novels. We turned the Dragonlance graphic novels into that, and now they're doing original stuff, I think. But it's a whole different world, though. It's like it's not it's not as aligned with comics as like average person who's not into any of that stuff. Was like, oh, these nerds all look the same to me. It's like, no, we're very different beasts, and because one is a passive form of entertainment and one is a very like active interactive form of entertainment, reading versus game. And I mean, I played that stuff as a kid, but all I wanted to do was just draw and make up everyone's characters and roll.
I
got really into the TMNT Mayfair TMNT game, or no, whoever Palladium. There was the DC
Palladium,
DC Mayfair game.
Yeah. Okay.
See, I've always been the teacher. I love when my kids doodle on assignments.
Yeah.
So I've been able to pick up some like really creative kids over time, both with like, pencil and paper drawings. In fact, I have a bulletin board where it's kind of like the fridge. We call it the fridge. So where kids doodle, and a lot of drawings at the end of the year end up going on that. The same thing with digital art. It's amazing because I was looking into both of, your works with the digital comics and then also, your standard format. Of the two, which do you prefer to do, or is it like a combination?
Well, we do. I mean, if like drawing wise, I mostly draw on the iPad.
Okay.
And because it's I just am able to work so much faster, and I can draw anywhere. I can draw on the plane. I can draw, at any hotel. And then it makes me a way better inker than I ever was. But then but usually for paper, I'll do that at conventions for commissions. And then but I'm also like not the perfect example of like an actual full-time comic book artist, because my whole life obsessively drew, and then from a very young age got into the publishing side. So like as I'm drawing, I'm also writing, I'm also doing all like graphic design and production, and then like a few years later running this company with employees. So I'm really like 20 years behind, people my age who've been in the industry professionally just as an artist, and I never stopped drawing.
Think about it this way. Would you have ever imagined being 12, 13 years old, owning your own company, getting to do what you enjoy doing as a kid?
Yeah, well, that's all I ever thought about. So
Yeah.
it was like, that was, it would have been like determined to do it. But I do remember like being, I was like 20 years old, 20, probably 20, like being in Baltimore at a convention where these artists, Evan Dorkin and Sarah Dyer, they're a couple. And he was just really funny indie comic artist I like, with a series called Milk and Cheese, kind of that's just about absurd humor. But they had been working on for Cartoon Network, and they were working on that original Coast to Coast, Space Ghost Coast to Coast, the first era of Adult Swim stuff. And
oh wow,
I remember like waiting for the elevator at this convention where I had to like take off. I could never be at the shows on Fridays because I had to work, and I was like driving all night to get to the shows. And I was like, I remember that viscerally, like someday I'll be able to be at the convention on Friday. And then hearing their conversation, where they were just shooting the shit with each other, but they're also kind of going through their schedule the next week, and they're kind of like, oh, we got to get to LA. Oh shit, yeah, then we got to do this, and and then we got to have that meeting. And they're not complaining, but they're also kind of like, just they got so much to do and they're busy and kind of stressed a little bit, and they're talking about this. And I'm just kind of eavesdropping, like, that sounds incredible. So I always think about that stuff, like in 3 weeks is San Diego Comic-Con, and we've got to be out there. I got to fly out Tuesday, and the show starts Thursday. It goes till Sunday, and it's like a ton of work.
So would you say that the business aspect now is starting to get in the way of your creative process at all?
I would say it's always has been like,
okay.
And now I'm kind of going in backwards. So now I've been kind of stepping out of that more. And it's like, for me, it's like, oh my God, I don't have to do all that. I can, I'll never leave that completely though, because it's something about, if you've had your own autonomy for that long, it's just hard. Hey, like right now, Kickstarter, if you've got the following, you can fire up a Kickstarter. Your fans will show up and support just about anything you do, and fulfill the books, and they'll. You can do new ideas that you never would have been able to get away with just trying to push out through the stores first, and that's more and more things are going that way. So we'll always have that, but yeah, it's nice to start working with some bigger teams and some budgets to help. Because if you're going to be a publisher, a big publisher, like that's what you're doing. Like if you're going to be an artist, if you're going to be a comic book artist, you're drawing that page all day, and you're probably working longer than a typical 40-hour job. And that's what you do, and you have to put all your brain power and energy into that. And if you're a writer, you can write like 4 scripts a month if that's all you're doing. You can always have, so I'm kind of in between. Like I write a lot, form the ideas, and I'll try to segue this into the actual UFO topic of this podcast and all that stuff.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Lots of ideas. I hijack your your formatting.
You're fine, man. You're fine.
So my like sweet spot, or where I enjoy the most, is taking the ideas I have that I kicked around for a while. I decide, okay, yeah, this one's not going away. I want to do something with this. Write up the plots, and then since I am an artist, I will draw the characters and build the world and provide as a lot more than a typical writer would, and then work with another artist, and then that artist actually draws the book, and then that allows me to kind of work on different things, and with the exception that I am trying to, like with Mercy Sparks, which you mentioned in that intro, the last one of that I drew myself, like a 48-page book, and that was the first time I've drawn a full comic in forever. So it's but that's I want to have something that I keep doing that, and yeah. But other than that, so much of the time though, the company is anybody that runs a small business, small to big business, doesn't matter. It's meetings, and then all of a sudden you got to look at a spreadsheet for like 3 hours, or you've got to do with publishing. There's so much with inventory. Managing third-party logistics for your inventory and your web store and your distributors and all this stuff. And then if you're going to conventions, like I just started getting accepted into more conventions just as a creator, and actually signed with a booking agent that's handling some of that. I've never had that before. So I've been in this business for so long, and it's like, when they know you're a publisher, they want you to pay for the booths, like right from the jump, because you literally get sent to talk to a different person. And when you're a creator, I mean, usually they're in the vibe of like contacting the creators and trying to like welcome them into the show if they're of any notoriety at all, I've always been this weird hybrid where it's like, well, I am a creator, I've done all these things, if I was only doing that, you probably would have invited me to a lot of the stuff, but but you're also a publisher. And so hopefully it's worked out in this very great, like serendipitous way where like I just makes me keep feeling grateful because I have less and less to do. And then I think like, wow, this is what it can be like, and on just the creative side, then but having the blessing of having like the knowledge of everything going on. If you were just a creator, you wouldn't know. There's so much you don't know, and you're guessing like, what is the publisher doing? Like, you don't know how all of the processes work and everything. So it could, like, I could be the best creator any publisher has ever worked with, because I'm going to understand and empathize with whatever they're doing, and also be very like easy to spot any bullshit if they're not doing something they should be.
Yeah. Well, like when you were bringing up Image Comics, and like I said, I wasn't a big comic book guy, but I knew enough to buy like 10 of each of their very first run, like Spawn, like issue 1, and sealing it away in bags, and the different they did the whole different covers, and some of them were foil and all that. So like any first comic books that they put out, I bought like multiples of them, and I really liked them though too. I thought they were really well done. But yeah.
I mean, it's hard to like really capture, like express to someone who wasn't there how popular they were at the time. I mean, they were legit rock stars. And
yeah, because literally they were like giving the middle finger to the big industry guys, Yeah,
I mean, dudes that never cared about comics, in middle school and high school, and so all of a sudden we're like, hey, what's that book coming out I've heard about? Like, I lived in Cincinnati, Ohio in high school, and it was in like the front of a section of the arts section of the newspaper. I remember Savage Dragon was one of the main characters of this big picture in there. So, and they were doing, these huge signings all across the country. They would put them in tents outside of the comic shops so they had room for the crowds. And, they were, I always like get to put my stamp that I say I had a mall signing one time. Like I actually had a mall signing when G.I. Joe came out. But they had real mall signings. Like I thought I was like awesome that we had like, a couple hundred people or something in line, but man, these guys would have like
a line,
Destiny's Child showing up it was all, for comic books. So, unfortunately for people buying those, everybody was buying them and everybody was putting them in bags and boards. So there's millions of them out there, and they're not worth anything.
Right.
But if you came around about 10 years later buying them when the print runs were really, really low after things crashed, those are the ones you got to seek out.
Yeah.
That's when books like The Walking Dead came out and stuff like that.
But I mean, there's still a high market for it. So even in my classroom, I've got comics and I have graphic novels. So
graphic novels are huge with the high school kids at my school, especially the girls. Believe it or not, because of the anime stuff.
Well, it has to do with attention span too. It's like the kids want to read the story, but going paragraph by paragraph through a traditional novel, that's not necessarily their forte. So you put something that has the images and the pictures in front, whether it's a remake from a classic or something that's been, spawned as new, the kids eat it up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people don't realize that. So you'll hear a lot of chatter online about comic books are in trouble or hurting, and it's like all false. Like that, the standard industry of how the old stores work. There's all kinds of conversation to have there. There's problems with a lot of that stuff in some ways. Some places are doing fantastic though, but comics as a medium, at large, has never been bigger. And 40% of comics are manga. They're all the manga, anime, graphic novels. That's 40% of the market, roughly. The other 40% is for kids, like little kids, like Dogman, Captain Underpants, and all that stuff. And that was for years, like I'm talking like 20 years, we were worried that there weren't kids coming in to read comics. And now just more kids than ever. And then the other 20% is everything else. So in that, there's a tiny little sliver, 7% is superheroes.
Wow.
And the rest is supernatural, sci-fi, romance, slice of life, adult stuff. Like, I mean, it's every genre, because comic books is a medium, not a genre. And people think superheroes, and if they really know what's going on, it's almost like the movies took over, the superhero thing. And it's almost in a weird way. I think it kind of makes kids less interested in some of the Marvel Universe stuff and all that, because they just get so much of it through video. It's like, well, why would I've got all this other stuff I can go buy now. And,
that's very true.
So we saw this, if I'm not getting too off on a tangent here, the whole trend, this is, I kind of like be a data nerd for this stuff, just being in it. And I think really being there to witness it, like being like, okay, being, right out of high school in the 90s, watching, being at these conventions, it's all dudes. It's like all dudes. If there was a female there, it was because she was like dragged along by her boyfriend or something. And there'd be like maybe 2 or 3 women in a convention of 1,000 people that were genuinely there, and then that started changing and shifting, and, also like they didn't really feel that welcome there either. And a lot of times, and there weren't that many, cosplay was not a thing. Like that was, it's like a dude dressed like Aquaman, just going through back issues, That's right. But there's no like, hey, take my picture. And then, it just kept changing and changing. And then around 05, 06, something like that, Tokyo Pop was this company that came out. They brought all the manga, started bringing it over in the digest size. And they actually did the right to left reading, which like that was their like a really great marketing gimmick, which actually was less work for them. And that blew up. And that's when all of a sudden, and it coincided with Borders and Barnes and Noble blowing up everywhere. So now every kid in the country didn't have to find a comic book shop, which was harder to find. They were hanging out at the bookstores anyway, because they were so big and had coffee shops and everything else. And then I started noticing right away, like, oh, look, there's like a bunch of girls hanging out, like 12, 13-year-old girls sitting in the aisle reading the books. And now if you're like a 14-year-old boy who was felt like a nerd who had to stop reading comics if he wanted to be a girlfriend, didn't have to necessarily stop anymore. And that kind of like culturally shifted things. And then the conventions started blowing up at the same time the Marvel movies started coming out. And as much as I personally, honestly can't stand the show, The Big Bang Theory played a big part in the cultural phenomenon.
Absolutely. There's another Dungeons and Dragons reference right there too. Yep.
So all this stuff, same time. And then so around 2015, 2014, you started seeing, it had been about 10 years. So you had all these like teenage girls coming into the market, a whole new swath of like, teenage boys keep coming in. Now you see all these like early 20 something creators coming in with a whole new influence. All of a sudden, like, way more female creators come in. And they'd always said when we were selling those D&D books, they were way ahead there with their novels. They were way ahead of everyone on the data. And then the bookstores also, they said, women read more than men. Just women buy more
Absolutely.
books.
That's not a secret.
Yeah. Women, I don't know. I remember what numbers were, but women buy way more books than men do, read a lot more prose. So they're like, when comic books get up there, more women will read comics than men do. And then by the 20-teens, it was 50-50 male-female ratio. Comic-Cons, social media also blowing up, all this stuff. So
and then they get to dress up now too. So
yeah,
and then they got the nerdy guys following them around like little puppy dogs.
Yeah, now a Comic-Con is like, it's really like 4 different events happening on top of each other. There's some people that are there to read and collect. Some people that are there, some people that want to buy new comics to read. Some only care about collecting. Some are there for the art. And then you got people who only like you gotta look at it more like how you are when people go to a music festival. Most people are there to see a couple bands. They want to drink, they just want to buy beer and maybe buy some shirts, have a good time and go. They don't necessarily like leave the next week and go to the local record store and start digging through old vinyl records and collecting them obsessively. It's just more mainstream now, and it's casual and so we've got all the problems now of like, hey, congratulations, you made it, you're mainstream. Also, that means you're not so special. Like, you're just another thing that we do. But now
your popularity bites you in the ass.
We didn't have though before that last thing I was talking about. The thing that was missing from that was kids. So even in like it was still like, well, how are little kids going to come in? Now you've got like tens of millions of kids now they've all aged into the manga. There's new kids haven't stopped coming in, like little kids. So we're about to see a whole other like tsunami of, all those 20 somethings are now in their 30s, and you're about to see a bunch more 20 something creators come in and that's just not going to stop. So now that's why you're like, on the converse side, I was just at this G.I. Joe convention I was at, which is, honestly, it's 40 to 50-year-old men, and older, just, who are into the 80s Joe stuff. There's thousands of people there, but that's mostly who it is. And I've kind of used to always be worried about like, how do you stay relevant with all that newer stuff? I'm starting to realize that we don't really have to, because our age is not going to stop buying this stuff.
That's right.
When we're 80, it's going to be like, what, Grandpa wants that new AI and powered Optimus Prime.
That's right. With our walkers.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Michelle, I think you had something else you wanted to ask there, didn't you?
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
this one.
Of all your works, which one would you say either that you're most proud of or is your favorite?
Oh, I'm really, really bad at picking any favorites.
Which kid do you like the best?
I can't even tell you like my favorite band is or anything. Like I'd say like, I'm proud of the recent Mercy SPARX for like, it's the first thing I've drew in a long time. And I think I got a good energy in there there was one book I wrote, my most like probably award-worthy or critically acclaimed type of book was a graphic novel I was hired to do by someone. Then they wanted me to publish it as well, though, and but I had to really research the hell out of it in a pretty tight time frame. It was on the Armenian genocide. So it's called Operation Nemesis: A Story of Genocide and Revenge, and it's about Soghomon Tehlirian, who assassinated Talat Pasha was the main Turkish leader responsible for most of that. And it's all based on a true story, self-contained graphic novel. And it's already been 10 years. That was 20. They wanted it for the 100th anniversary in 2014. So that was one. And
Is that a hard copy or digital?
Hard copies are still out there. Digital. See, it's funny. Our site's actually, I don't know if you get on our website right now or not. We have, we're in the middle of an office move right now, so all of our inventory is like locked up and our web store's shut down. So perfect timing for my smart marketing for my podcast interview.
So this is the website here, devilsdo.net.
Well, and the only reason I ask that, because if you are doing standalone, like historical, or, what's current in the news and making those into comic books and graphic novels, you have no idea how many teachers would be your best friend.
Oh yeah. That's another reason, part of the thing I want to, there's so much work to be done with, like right now is the ALA is about to come up or going up. Was it this weekend or American Library Association? There's so much work to do to push out the word to all of the different networks you need for the teachers to be able to get the books, for the libraries to be able to get the books. We're like Operation Nemesis did not get into nearly as many places as I felt it should have. We thought it was going to be a lot bigger reception. I mean, it's distributed through Simon & Schuster. It was out there, but
if it's not in a certain curriculum, though, I mean, unfortunately, teachers wouldn't pick up on it. But other things I could see being very, very marketable.
But that one was interesting. I don't really seek out that stuff, I do get to be a little picky on that. Like I've got to be interested in it and do something. So I'm not like, I don't write books for kids, very rarely. And I kind of like use, it's funny. I kind of use comics as this like gateway to other worlds I'm interested in. So if I get interested in something, like going back to comics being a medium, not a genre, if it's something I'm interested in, it's like, then it makes me want to tell a story about that kind of subject matter. And then all of a sudden that gives me access to that industry or that community or that world. And that wasn't something I started intentionally to do, but then I realized like, this is a pattern. So kind of like, I guess it was started with wanting to be in comics using G.I. Joe and that license as opening a door, kind of like hacking, before they used the word growth hacking, which is kind of cringe. But growth hacked into comics where I wanted to be. And then I got really fascinated with like the invention of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin in the 2010s, and I wrote a book. I did the Bitcoin comic handbook, all about the technology, why it was important beyond money, what it was going to mean in the future, and just wrote it was like half prose, half comic books to make it educational, easy to follow. And I got like picked up by an event, wanted to buy like 5,000 copies to give away. The CTO of the MacArthur grant gave it all these props and gave me a nice write-up, and it got really well received by that world, and that opened all these doors and clients and stuff. And then the self-publishing book I wrote, which a prose book, but that opened up doors to give me an extra clout with ad agencies and stuff started hiring us for things. And then so then being into all this ancient lost civilization stuff and UFOs and all that, UFOs and aliens is the way more common to write about than
especially now
in comics.
So here's our segue.
Yeah. Yep. But the Arkworld was all about that. So then that, now it did not sell. It was a really
That's
tough
unfortunate.
seller. I went real deep on, kind of obsessively going into developing the world, and maybe I went too deep, but it got me invited to the Cosmic Summit, which I really wanted to go to. It got me some like Earth Ancients podcast with Cliff Dunning, talking to you guys now, and it's I haven't like thrown the baby out with the bathwater. It's still there. We got 3 issues out, and I'm working on some other stuff in that same world and premise as well.
Yeah, so that's kind of exactly where I wanted to go with this, because I didn't get a chance to talk to you at the Cosmic Summit. I ended up getting my time kind of gobbled up with Micah Hanks and then Scott Walter, who was like at the table next to you at the very first Cosmic Summit, right? And so I saw all the comic books and stuff, and I'm like, well, that's interesting. And then I would talk to Scott when he had an opening, and I'm trying to get him to come on the show and everything. And then Micah Hanks wanted to talk to me about Michelle and I's sighting that started all this. And
I got to hear more about that, but we can talk about. You probably told people this story a million times.
Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. And I'm like, what in the world is a comic book creator doing here? And I saw the guys from Neurotic down, at the end of where you were at, and I'm like, okay, so obviously there's something going on here. So Arkworld, tell us about that. What inspired you, and what do you think about like all of this stuff? Because I've got people in chat. I've got our old curmudgeon who's always here, Guy Merritt. He says, I'm not being critical, but what's with the title of the video, Wayne? I know nothing about comics.
When are we going to stop talking about comic books?
Right. Well, because Guy, he has written comic books about ancient technology and has a alternative idea, which comes to learning about these ancient histories and stuff. So, Josh, why don't you tell us a little bit about Arkworld?
Sure. Yeah, we'll have to, in the intro, the subpit, like skip to 15 minutes for the beginning of that.
52 minutes already, man.
Oh, man. So Arkworld is about wow, that time flies. It's about man, the subject. I should grab a copy and just read the back. It's this action adventure, sci-fi series about a couple that is caught up in like a deep state conspiracy, hiding like eventual calamity coming to the earth. Except this is like 13,000 years ago, and you realize like, oh, this is in the past, and the world's nothing like we believed it was. And it starts on the 10th anniversary after the day the gods left. So we've got that's kind of the setup. We don't say who the gods were, what they were, but the world is way more advanced than it was supposed to have been, but just in different ways. There's all these stone megalithic structures all around the world. There's pyramids. There's, people have vehicles with the ability to fly around, and there's a global civilization. But it's just different. Things run on. They seem to have a better understanding of gravity and magnetics and that kind of technology. But like their phones, their communication devices are different. They're and all that. So it sends these 2 characters, Seth and Cleoto. Seth lives in the place where will eventually become Egypt, in Kemet, and she's from Atlantis, living there. We don't actually see Atlantis. We know she's from there, and she's sort of studying there. They've become a couple. He works what he thinks is a very boring construction job that his dad got him, but he's like, his job is to like set up all these like magnetic resonance devices that lift these giant stones out of the way from the quarry. And basically someone sees something they weren't supposed to have seen that has to do with like corruption going on in the Atlantean government, trying to hide something, and it causes them to go on this whole adventure around the planet, which gives me an excuse to send characters to the place that eventually, thousands of years later will become like Mesoamerica. And then there's a guy from where it will eventually become sort of like the northern Gaelic areas and all that. So we have this sort of like, team, like a Mission Impossible, like superhero almost kind of team running, and it jumps and it spans. I left out that it spans between times. So it also takes place in the present day. And then you see some glimpses from the distant past in between now and then, and what may have happened after some disaster befell everyone, and people who are trying to play a part in, surviving through all of that. So in the present day, you've got a structure of the old money, like old money of like royalty and the church that knows more about this than they want people to know. You've got like the old new money, which was like the robber barons, and there's a family called the Vanderchilds who I have in there. They're sort of involved in this, old railroad workers that stumbled upon some things. And then there's the new money, like the tech money. They get this Chinese tech billionaire, Rennie Zheng, who his really advantageous position, and he's aware of it. And they discover an ancient Vimana in like the very first few pages of the first issue. And then you start to learn about how it's all connected.
So obviously then, you being at the Cosmic Summit, you must have some kind of inspiration or started hearing, reading, learning about the Younger Dryas impact theory, or some type of ancient aliens, civilization, something that started to become your muse, I guess.
Yeah.
To create such a world and background history. Where did all that come from, and what's your thoughts on what's out there for real, like today?
Yeah, I got into all that stuff, like I always was into astronomy and things like that. I think a lot of kids are, but and then always just thinking about all these ideas. And but I looking back on it though, like I hadn't really thought about this much until recently. My first book I ever published was called The Minotaur, and it was about an archaeologist who found the labyrinth.
Oh, sweet.
And he, but that's like he accidentally unleashes a demon that the labyrinth was created to contain, and that was an excuse to have this big fun monster character. But just always loved the idea of, life out there and thinking about that. And that was actually the one thing I was still scared of in movies and stuff as a kid too. Like the movie Communion terrified me in 7th grade. And
oh yeah.
And then years later, I got to end up working with Whitley Strieber, and we published a book based on one of his ideas called The 9 Incidents. Really though, just having always been in that and reading anything I could get my hands on, but never really doing too many stories around it. I would do more like traditional sci-fi UFO kind of stories. When I was 14 though, I did see a UFO. So that was like, it's one of the more boring UFO stories, but it was enough to be like, well, I saw that. I can't deny that's not a thing.
Well, sometimes they're boring, and other times they're terrifying.
Yeah.
I mean, it goes
almost glad it was boring.
Yeah, it goes from different extremes. But
Yeah.
we'll have to talk about that a little bit later. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then, but I do have to give credit, like when Ancient Aliens came out, like that was the first show that showed a lot of these locations with really high quality video. Whether you're just watching it for fun entertainment or not, it's like I didn't know that existed like that, and also it gave you the opportunity to hear how absurd some of the explanations are from like the mainstream narrative on it. So whether or not, you want to say like, oh, aliens came down and built this thing, it's like, I don't know about that, but it definitely sure as shit wasn't built by someone pounding a bunch of stones together to get this like precision lathed thing that's like, 1/10,000th of an inch in accuracy, that would take like 5 CNC machines to do today. And then it was, so once you're into that, if you're following all the different discoveries in science from different disciplines like DNA and like not just archaeology, but also following like just old discoveries about previous human species they keep finding, and how the date keeps getting pushed back on modern humans. our timeline is looking to be way longer, and I'm clearly stealing a lot of this from Ben Van Kerkwick's great presentation he put together.
Oh yeah,
which just lays this out really nicely. So and then like so clearly like Graham Hancock stuff, like I ate that up, and then
so what was it? Was it just the lack of decent like explanations for you that drew you in? Like, you obviously you see the high quality video and you're hearing about some of these wackadoo ideas, aliens built the pyramids and stuff like that, but what we had in response to those crazy ideas was just dumb. Like, yeah, there's teams of people with ropes and logs moving 200-ton blocks up the sides of mountains in like Peru, right?
Yeah, it was constantly run up against, like, I get it why, like, that makes sense if you're like, why the educated rational person would have this response like that. They've heard this explanation. You're entrusting that people who've spent their lives studying this are, would have, done all their home research on that. And it's like, but then you keep running up against stuff like just the Great Pyramid being the most famous one. Like, once they get past the blocks, literally once you get past that, and then you get past of how many blocks it was, and then you get past like, well, also that was just that many blocks literally on the ground to make the foundation for the whole thing. Then you get past that, it's like, okay, you found a way. Maybe they got like 5 blocks up over the course of like 8 weeks, let alone the millions and millions they need. And what about the precision? Okay, what about the angles they had? What about the harmonics that it creates? Like, I mean, just what about the planning it would have taken? Oh, now the fact that you weren't supposed to have a wheel and you weren't supposed to have mathematics like this back then. I mean, it just, so whatever the answer was, then the average person hasn't heard how mundane and ridiculous the standard answers are that we were taught. And that's where I am like, I don't have any friction there of like resisting, like wanting to hang on to that old paradigm. I'm like, oh, well, that was wrong. Like, that's like, I change my mind quickly as soon as I'm presented with that new information. So,
and I think a lot of people are like that when it comes to the whole UFO UAP topic. It's been such a thing of popular culture for the last 70 years, Roswell, and then you had the 50s movies and all the sightings and everything, the Cold War, all this stuff going on, and sightings, the X-Files, the UFO files, it goes, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. Now it's like, well, why don't they just have full disclosure? Probably because they don't know what it is, but now they're acknowledging that it is. There is something to acknowledge. There is and is.
And then it does go like the other way when I have seen it, because I love this stuff. And then I don't know how many times following someone who I like their work, or I like where they're going. And then all of a sudden they say something where I'm like, oh, you're not helping us. Like, because they go so far out there and they speak with such certainty about some other theory. And it goes the conspiratorial and the whole wrong way, where you're like, where it's just completely absurd, or it's very, might sound like might even sound like something to consider, but they just start to claim like, nope, we know this is what's going on. And so it's just, I don't know, always been in on that. It probably doesn't help too when I didn't hurt or didn't help to stop my fascination with this. My mom and stepdad both worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Get out of here.
Yeah, when my mom was a civilian worker and my stepdad was got up to captain in the Air Force, and he also, I didn't even know 2 years later, he worked for the NSA when he was there.
Oh, well, he was doing his job really good if you didn't know for a long time.
We had a phone in the house, like with the cord, they'd pick up and dial in like 87, I think, or 88 to dial in the internet, like into work. I just wanted to play games on the MacBook on the Mac, so I just like wanted to get off the phone thing. But so we had the internet before the World Wide Web, and then So it was always, when an X-Files comes out and I start learning about all the Area 51 stuff, it was always like a joke, like, what do you know?
Yeah, that was where they were supposedly taking the materials and I think some of the bodies from Roswell.
I just geeked out on this because I didn't know this until a couple years ago. This doesn't have a fun ending, and I don't know shit about anything because no one has ever said a word. But my sort of an adoptive grandmother figure, I've known since I was born. She's like 95 now, and I knew she worked at Right Pat with them because she was like the mentor to like all these like girls that worked there and stuff, and so my mom knew her, and I found out she was the head of the photography department. So I'm like, oh, this time I'm like, oh, Grandma Corky, if there's any photos of anything weird in there, she's probably seen it.
Wow. Yeah. And she hasn't said anything, huh?
No,
yeah.
I mean,
they don't want their pension taken away.
They won't tell you what color the curtains in the office were. They did a good job of profiling most people before they hire them.
Yeah.
It's always, do you have a need to know?
Wow. So, okay. So you do have like a connection to like Wright Patterson, man. That's a big deal. Do you know Ray Szymanski, one of our major returning guests that we have on here? He worked there.
I don't know, but I've definitely heard that name.
Yeah, he wrote a trilogy of books, but the one that we're famous for having him on is Swamp Gas My Ass, and he did a big deep dive into the 1966 UFO out here at Ann Arbor, Dexter area, and the whitewashing that was done by Project Blue Book and Alan Hynek that destroyed like people. I mean, it was weeks going on where UFOs were here and the media didn't cover it. Well, they were into it, but they didn't cover a lot that went on. And Ray was able to find the Air Wing commander from Selfridge National Guard, where him and his wingman were dispatched and chased these UFOs across Ann Arbor and mid central Michigan. And they just outmaneuvered them. And he gives a deposition and everything before he dies. And I've got the video and everything of him saying what this thing was doing, and they could not keep up. It outmaneuvered them. And this was, 1966, but you didn't hear anything of that. And so Ray has his, like, he gifted to Ray the, his fighter helmet, that he wore from, yeah. So yeah, if you ever get a chance, it's, let me see, grab my book here. It's really good, but it's this book right here.
Yeah, for sure. I'll check that out.
Yeah, by Raymond Szymanski. He's been on our show like multiple times.
I think I definitely heard his name before because it came up with Right Pat.
Yeah, he was behind getting the UFO, one of the first UFO conventions this summer to happen there. And things have kind of fallen apart. I don't know if it's still happening again or not, but he was like the main keynote guy.
Wow. I think that's just stuff so fascinating. And that's another thing too. Like when you see, I mean, I remember when Stephen Greer had this, I mean, as amazing as the David Grush, hearing and all that stuff is, it's like Stephen Greer had this mock hearing in over 15 years ago, and it was mock, but it was like 50 something people, and you had the former Secretary of Defense of Canada, and you had like major military generals, and that like it doesn't matter if this guy was a complete fraud or not. I'm thinking like you don't get all these people with these kind of credentials to say all this stuff.
Well, that's the thing.
Exactly as they did.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, Stephen Greer might be a fraud. He might be crazy out of his mind. But here's these people that have had these experiences. They're not making it up. They tell the same story every single time. They obviously experience something. It's just Greer is like the central contact point. So, I can't discount what these other people are saying and what happened to them because Greer's standing there.
I think that's fair. That's the thing. Like I'll go down I'll go to Crazy Town. I'll listen to the craziest shit from like someone just to like, you know, and find the nugget. Or I'll listen to someone who I'm like, yes, I like this person, and then I'll wait, and all of a sudden they say the crazy thing. I'm like, oh man, but I'll still keep listening. It doesn't mean that I've just bought into everything. But I think that a lot of people are like, they hear that one thing they don't like, and they're like, oh, turn it off. You know, so you got to go along for the ride.
Yeah.
and that was like with the Arkworld stuff. It came from like, once I really started going down those rabbit holes and like just seeing all of these things that are out there, then that leads. So, you know, if I saw someone on a show like an Ancient Aliens or something, it's like, oh, who's that guy? Oh, I'll go find his lectures on YouTube because he's been doing this stuff for 10 years, 15
That's
years,
right.
but no one cared. And you find them talking to people, you get their books, and then you you find the stuff that like you undisputably is just has unexplainable, you know, facts going on, and you start to just see all these things that exist, and then learning about the younger dryas impact theory and the growing credence to that, and
how old our actual species may actually be. I mean, if they're saying, like Graham Hancock always says, things just seem to keep getting older, right? So, and that includes humans. So I mean, anybody with a brain, and I'm not trying to be a jerk about this, but if you think about where we've come in the last, let's just say 100 years, Industrial Revolution, and now we're in this tech world where you and I are talking, you're in Chicago, and it's instantaneous communication throughout the whole world to anybody who wants to tune in and watch this, right? And then when we release the audio, they can listen to it anywhere, multiple times, on any platform, on any kind of device, while they're driving, whatever. You think about, we've really done this in the last 150 years or so. Now, if our race or our species is 1 million years old at this point, they're really thinking that Homo sapiens sapien is about 1 million years old. Why could we have not, with our same brain capacity, come up with a different type of technology, but we're doing the same thing? There's no way we could have been living for 990,000 years in loincloths and addle-addles and bow and arrow, especially with all of the creatures and stuff that are out there. There's no way in hell that any of that makes sense, that we didn't go further ahead. I mean, I'm sure there's still primitive tribes today.
Yeah, there's still primitive tribes, and you've got like, it seems like whenever you get humans a good like 50 years of just no oppression from a government or religion, and like just to get them to stop killing each other for a second, then we do amazing things really fast. Yeah. And like the whatever Maslow's hierarchy of needs or what and then like, so that's now we're learning too, like, yeah, like I think the oldest I saw the 800,000-year-old like evidence of like the human jaw or teeth, modern Homo sapiens sapiens. And then the average person just doesn't know that. They never heard that before. And that's why Ben's thing does such a good job. He's like, here's what we thought, here's the new evidence. Before you even get into any of this other conversation, just, do you know, the average person has no idea that all this new science has happened in the last 15 years. And then you got like Denisovans being around 50,000 years ago. Who knows? They might have been building all this stuff. We don't know. So once you know that, and then if you're writing fiction and you like this stuff, and you're also like, besides being fascinated, you're like really just a geek for it too. Like, I want to see that story told. And then I go watch a TV show come out like 10,000 AD, and it's just popcorn fun garbage. I mean, there's no effort whatsoever put into anything. They're not trying to be historically accurate in any way. And then, you know, even like before I knew what I knew now about this stuff, still like watching stuff like Lost. And then what a letdown Lost was. For me,
That's funny. I was just telling Michelle last night, she never watched an episode. I said, "Oh my
I have
God,
not.
you are evil. You need to watch that. You need to
And
binge watch it."
but then now then you're like, oh man, there's so much more interesting stuff they could have done about it being tied to some ancient civilization, and then all of the stuff like, so you're like, you find like, where's that story? I want that story. And then you assume like, well, if I've got this idea, then 5 other people are probably working on the same thing right now, because that always happens.
Yeah, it always happens. That's right.
So with Arkworld is one of these things I had floating around for like 10 years and still no one was doing it. I'm like, okay, that's what usually when it's like the ideas make through the filter, like, okay, I've got to do this. And it was really hard though to find the right artists to work with. And I eventually started working with Travis Hemel on it. Who he wasn't into this stuff at all, but we worked well together, and he was down for it. But it's like, okay, I kept using the analogy, like, this is like Star Trek, not Star Wars. The spaceship doesn't just fly by magic, and you're not banging on it like, you hunk of junk. No,
Right.
We're gonna try to come up with some way to theorize how this might have worked the same way they do, on how their warp drives work and all that stuff. And if there's a space anomaly happening somewhere causing something to happen, they try to base it on some kind of science, even if they're making up 90% of it. That's what we're doing with Arkworld. So, that's what I do with anything I'm writing like that. I have this other series, The Encoded. It takes place in 2055. I like obsessively rack my brain over where we might be then and what stuff might exist. And then just
look at Gene Roddenberry, man.
Yeah,
flip phones,
Arthur C. Clarke. One of my biggest, most impressionable sci-fi books I ever read was definitely Childhood's End by Arthur C. Clarke. That like, a guy predicted so many stuff like 80 years ago, and his story on how an alien invasion works has never been topped. And you can't tell anyone about it because it ruins it. Just it's like, man, it's like the most baller move ever by the aliens.
Well, they would be pretty advanced, and they would probably be able to outthink us. And to some people, that's what they're doing today. So
I'll just say they don't fire a shot. They do it all without firing a shot.
Sure. Well, and then I'm sure you've heard of like hybrid programs and stuff going on here today, right?
Yeah. Well, here's the great thing about being a writer, especially in comics, is gives you an excuse to go down all these rabbit holes, and
yes,
you never have to like decide, even to yourself, like how much of this is just because I'm really into this, and how much of this because I'm researching ideas.
Right.
But I love the idea of a story where, what if the dark secret in all of this is that there is this super advanced species, interacting with us, and they're traveling the stars, but instead of being like, oh, once you're ready, we'll let you in. It's actually, no, you're never going to be ready, but don't worry, your race will live on, because we're going to like raise some of you ourselves. And those are the ones that are allowed. So you get to know your species exists, but we're not, they just kind of laugh. Like, we're never letting you guys up here. Are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
And then the real big secret is that's actually what's going on every planet. There's a super elite race, and they do this in every world, not just ours. And they consider that. And then every single other planet is sort of like, just like, okay, we decide who comes up here, and then we, and it's really because they're looking at it like, look, we wouldn't be around here 5 million years from now, and every single world is going to get hit with cosmic impacts. It's going to get hit with plagues and God knows what else. So, if no civilization can think about living past, 30,000 years without there being some kind of major global disaster. So that'd be, it's the kind of stuff that's fun to think about. And then it's like, I don't know, maybe something like that's going on.
Well, we got the Younger Dryas impact theory, which, just looking at the evidence, as, these guys take a very scientific approach. They don't speculate so much on civilizations like Hancock tries to do with these structures and dating them to be older than most people would date them. But like just looking at the scientific evidence that there was something that happened with the floods 10,000, 12,000 years ago. Something happened to cause a major catastrophe, but we can even go back further. And one of the ones that I'm always interested in, and you might want to look this up, is the eruption of the supervolcano Mount Toba in Indonesia. We were down, they estimate that humans went through a genetic bottleneck 76,000 years ago. We were down to about 5,000 mating pairs of humans in southern Africa.
And I've heard of that. And
yeah,
that's like a mainstream accepted, like widely known.
That's right.
Wasn't there something? Wasn't that where there was a crazy phenomena too, where they're starting to discover that like the ratio male to female was something like 17 females to every male?
Yeah, something like that.
Something I heard about that, which is like raising the question of, can the human species, like under stress and duress, like actually like know, like, oh, we need to like multiply, like other animal species have shown to do that, or was it for some simpler explanation?
No, I think if you look at us as being tied to the planet, and nature has a way of wanting to have life continue in one way or another. I think it depending on the environmental pressures that our genetics are put on, we have genetic memory of all of our ancestors built into us. There can be easily something in the planet that is triggered during these catastrophes, and just with the way that we would react to the trauma and stuff, that would trigger some type of every woman that gets pregnant now is going to have a 90% chance of giving birth to another female, so that we can repopulate this planet even faster. I mean, you start going down some of those rabbit holes and marry that up with what we know about genetics and things like that.
Just because, I mean, there's other species that have been shown to do that. So it's pretty wild. Like
and some will change their sex.
Yeah. And then just knowing now too, like all these mysteries now we know we all have Neanderthal DNA in us, and we know we have Denisovan DNA in us, and the average person has never even heard of Denisovans. And they were only discovered in like 2008. But and then the most common DNA traces of that species within us today is like Australian Aborigines and I think North American natives. I think
so. I think that's
that, but right. It's like it's something that makes absolutely no sense.
No sense, right?
And
then there's like the Paracas too. Like
you know what, man, those frustrate the hell out of me, because this is when you find out how stupid the answers are for why we don't know more, is just complete lack of interest and money. And you're like, where's the billionaire just throwing the money at this stuff for fun? Like those skulls, most of them are head binding and all that. And human skulls can do crazy things that don't look real, like with certain medical conditions and everything else. But some of those like are way too big to they measure them out.
Correct.
Too big to make any sense. And the biggest thing is that suture on their head, they don't have it. They don't have the same.
That's right. It means it's genetic.
Yeah, and it's like where's the only person doing DNA research is this guy Brian Forrester.
We've had him on the show.
Do that stuff.
Yeah, and what was interesting is that I don't know if it was his investigation or if it was somebody else's. They were doing the DNA testing and stuff, and they tracked them. Now get this, the Paracas are in Peru, right? The skulls and stuff that they were testing, they traced them back to the Black Sea region.
The Eurasia?
Yes. So, okay. And they had red hair.
Yeah, and then you get these myths about these weird looking guys coming over with all this knowledge and
red-haired giants.
it's just
It's amazing.
I don't know. It's just all the, and then the whole thing with the similarity between like the way the ancient Sumerian gods look and all these other gods from all over different worlds and the handbags and all that stuff.
Yep.
It just
why on Easter Island do the Moai have like what looks like a symbol that looks like a little handbag, and then you go over and they unearth Göbekli Tepe and there's that same symbol. So it looks like a sharing of knowledge.
At the Cosmic Summit this year, I didn't see all of it. Hugh Newman had his presentation on Göbekli Tepe and all of this stuff around Göbekli Tepe, like Karen Tepe and all these places that, I mean, they've barely excavated any of this stuff. And then you start to realize that Göbekli Tepe has been like hardly touched in over 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, get busy, guys. It's going to take you so long to do this. And you're not in but I got to go back and watch his presentation on the recording because he sounds like he was just showing all kinds of like, just pottery and other other stuff coming out. Oh, there's that you guys, I'm sure you guys probably know this. They found like a wooden housing structure that's like 140,000 years old or something like that.
No.
Someone else brought it up at the summit and I had forgotten about it, and I was like, oh yeah, and they had all the data like on the top of their head. Yeah, it's like this wasn't anything like some like super precise stone structure you can't explain. This was just wooden architecture, but it was like over 100,000 years old, indisputably. And they're like, okay, well, it might not have been Homo sapiens sapiens, but somebody was building this.
Somebody was.
So when you get just back to the stories and everything, it's like when you know all this stuff now, I'm like, okay, someone's got to do. There needs to be, if you're going to tell a fun sci-fi action story that takes place back then or deals in the subject matter in any way, like there's way too much amazing stuff out there not to build I want like a Lord of the Rings Lucas level like lore.
Yeah.
Like I got the general ideas of the rules in place, my own ideas for the story on what these things were and what their function is, and and bring in like all of these different things, try to think of all of it and put it all in there and have some kind of like reasoning for it. And because if it's fiction, if you find out any of it's wrong, you don't have to change it. You're like, well, that's just my fantasy world. But
right.
Like with the disasters, this is a good story that gets to like nothing. You never created anything new. With Arkworld, I'm thinking like, okay, if something like this was going to happen, what would you do? And you would have all these contingencies. So you would, okay, we're gonna, if you knew like 9 years from now something was coming, you're gonna try to stop it, but you're not sure if you can. It's going to be really bad. You might dodge a bullet and miss it. In which case, all your hard work to preserve everything was like good to have done anyway. But then you're like, okay, hopefully it's not that bad, but we're going to have archives and data and all our computers and stuff stored information somewhere. What if it's worse than that? You get all the way down to like the worst of the worst case. It's like, okay, we need the strongest, craziest stone shit that we can preserve this with. And we need to have other mathematical information encoded in things. And then we need to have, myths and things taught so it can at least be remembered somehow, so that when we get smart enough, we can rediscover the stuff later. That'd be like the absolute worst case scenario beyond extinction. And that's kind of what I was thinking of. You would have like, you'd have these underground cities that would, be able to hide people underground for centuries, possibly coming up for air. You'd have people floating in space in, basically like 100 years from now, we'll have space hotels and space tourism. And if there was a disaster coming, you'd be like pretty close to like, okay, we can have you living up there for a while. And then when they came down after some disaster, it'd be like their great grandkids who don't even really know what's going on. They're kind of actually desperate, but they'd be pretending to be more advanced, pretending to have like the one up on you and probably trick you into bringing them stuff to help where you really don't know that they're just desperate to stay alive. You'd have all these things going on, and
yeah, look at our cell phones. We're gods. Bring me food.
So you pick any one of those things to focus on, and there's your story.
Yeah,
and you can do that for decades, telling those stories. And then I realized Isaac Asimov did this story 80 years ago or whatever, and it was not that long ago, but it was Foundation, which then Apple made the TV show based off of. And but his wasn't in the past because he didn't know there wasn't all these discoveries yet.
Or if there was, it wasn't being communicated like it can be now.
Yeah, it's that story. It takes place, I think, like 10,000 years in the future, and it's the disaster is a whole different concept. But the whole premise is they're just creating all these contingencies because they know that like they're trying to stop the collapse of interplanetary civilization going from 30,000 years of shit, and they want to be like, if we can get it down to 1,000 years of terribleness, we won. And,
right.
So that's that was something that I loved, but I was also trying not to look at it too closely, so I don't want to steal their ideas.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, we've been at this at an hour and 31 minutes already. So time flies.
Sorry for the first hour of just comic book stuff.
Yeah, which, we have students, Michelle and I have students that listen to the podcast afterwards, and they're artistic, and some of them have even told me that they're interested in coming up with graphic novels and stuff. So hopefully they'll listen to this, and they'll be able to get some information gleaned about how you got your start, and the Kickstarter projects and stuff out there. But you said you had a very boring UFO story.
Oh, yeah.
So before we start wrapping this up, you got to tell us what happened with your UFO story.
Yeah, and then like if you've already got a link to were you telling this story in more detail, I'll get your guys' story later, or tell me off there.
Oh, it's almost in like every third episode with a guest we tell the story. We can tell it pretty quick.
So. Yeah, it was just I was out in the backyard in like 9th grade. This was in Cincinnati, and it's funny. My aunt was with me. She's 6 years older than me. My stepdad's baby sister, and I just saw her this weekend. I barely ever see her. She lives in Seattle. I was outside looking at constellations or something. I forget why I was out there, but I don't know if it was for school or just because I was always into that stuff. But I'm looking for something else, and I happened to see a little star going by that I just thought was a plane. It didn't have like blinking lights or anything though, but it was moving at the exact speed of like a plane. And I knew because I was into that, I knew comets and meteors and stuff. I'd seen that before, what that looked like. And so I'm not even really paying attention to it. And then it just goes, it just did a right angle turn, and it just boom, was gone.
Wow.
And I looked at her, I was like, did you see that? Like, yeah. You want to, let's go inside.
Yeah, satellites don't do that.
No, yeah. I mean, because that's what that's very similar what satellites look like. But they don't just all of a sudden stop and they just go boom.
Yeah.
I said,
yeah,
okay.
well
And then that was it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Michelle and our story basically boils down to a late night game of bingo at like 2:30 in the morning. Let out. We were hanging out with the old folks at the time, and we're heading home. And to get home, we had to get on the expressway, and we were going west, heading toward the expressway, a major Wayne Westland area, Canton area, and we're driving west on a major road, on Ford Road, and we're going toward 275 south, and I see 3 bright lights. Michelle sees them too, like about a mile away, look like they're over or moving toward the intersection of the expressway and the interstate that we were driving. And so we're driving and I'm like, what are those lights? And Michelle, she's like an airplane looking for metro kind of a thing. Detroit Metro Airport's about 14 miles away at this point where we're at. And I said, I don't know. So we just kind of keep going. And I'm thinking in my head, that's an airliner that is crashing with those bright lights. They're landing lights, even though they're in a very weird position. They're in a triangle, but usually landing lights are kind of close together because they're on the inside part of the wing along the fuselage and then on the nose wheel. And I've been around aircraft my whole life. I even had a stint where I was learning how to be a pilot myself and stuff. And I mean, everywhere I went with my dad and all this stuff, we went in an airplane. He was a pilot and worked for the major airlines. So every air show and everything, I've seen all of it, saw him in the military and stuff like that. And I'm thinking to myself, that's an airliner. It's going to crash land right in front of us and we're basically dead. That's all I can think of. I said, that makes no sense. And there's nowhere we can go. It's a huge airliner. Forget it. As we get closer, Michelle looks at me and then she's looking out front and I'm just seeing these lights. She goes, when did our military get something like that? And as we got closer, you could tell the outline of a huge equilateral triangle. It was black. And the one of the weirdest things, so I started taking observations because I'm a scientist and I teach science. So I'm like noticing things. She's putting the window down going, it's not making any sound. As we get closer and closer, I'm looking at it. The three bright lights you couldn't look at. They were that bright. But what I did notice is this thing was maybe about 150 feet above the ground. And the lights that were coming off of those angles, they were like hemispheres and they were so bright. I'm looking on the ground to see if I can see, because it's basically hovering over the intersection. And I'm looking on the ground, and this was in March of 2018. And I'm like, there's no light hitting the ground. It should be like spotlights.
Because it's so bright up there.
Yeah. But you can't look at it. And I'm going, well, what the hell is going on? So I look back up and I look at the body of the craft, and it had to be about 300 feet on a side. It was the size of a football field in the triangle. It was probably about 30 feet tall, and the whole skin of it was black, but it looked like a heat mirage. Like go outside today when the sun's out and look at blacktop, like put your head down and you would see the light waves being bent, right, from the heat. So it gives you that weird wavy motion. That's what the body of this thing looked like. And so we're getting really close to it. And I'm like, man, I'm not liking this at all. And then I hear in my head, get away from here. You don't belong here. Get away. And I gunned it. I mean, I had to do like a 100 or 270 degree turn on the ramp, and I was flooded with terrifying emotions, which I've never had. And I've jumped out of airplanes, you name it. I've never felt as scared of in my life. And Michelle's like keeps on looking at it and I'm gunning it. And then it was kind of facing with like the point toward us. And then the three dots in the corner, or the three lights in the corner were away from us. It rotates and starts moving parallel to us. And that's where Michelle got to see the back of it. And she saw that there were like rectangular,
two rectangles, one in each corner.
Yeah, on the back of it, like glowing red or something, weren't they?
It was like a reddish color.
Yeah, like bright, like brake lights. Not
yeah,
like kind of like.
Yeah, and the thing wasn't making any sound, and then it's moving parallel to us, and I'm watching it. And as we're driving, we go down this sound abatement where there's this wall and there's trees, and there's homes and stuff there because, well, it's a very populated area, and they don't want the cars sound, from the expressway interrupting. So we lose sight of it as we go down into like this lower area of the expressway. And I'm like, okay, we're going to pop up and it's going to be right there. We come out of the sound abatement. Maybe 2 seconds later, we look, not a trace of it, completely gone. Nothing. And when we got home, we didn't talk about it for a couple days. And then we said, that thing we saw? Maybe we should see if anybody else saw anything like that. And we started a Facebook group. And it was just, hey, here's our story of what we saw. Did anybody else see anything? Dude, we're up to 7,500 members on our Facebook group.
And was a lot of people in Michigan in that area that saw the same thing?
No, but
not that just everywhere.
Not that night, but everybody we got all kinds of people that have flooded into our Facebook group that they share photos, they share some videos, and some people are here to tell their story and see what other people are telling. And that's how I met like a couple of our guests, our first guests, that we've had on, who had the same kind of experience. And then the one guy that was in our chat, Guy Merritt, he was one of our first on like episode 4 who had a triangular experience just north of us in 1994 with a triangular craft hovering over the expressway. And then he went underneath it. Nothing happened as far as he knew. And I don't remember exactly all the details of his story, but he gets to work. It was really early in the morning, so it was still dark out. He gets to work. And then an hour later, a couple of his coworkers come in frazzled and whatnot, and come to find out that their vehicle was spun around by this thing, pulled up into this craft. They did something to him that they don't remember, and they put him back down on the road going the wrong way. So they were put back on the road driving south on northbound lanes of the expressway, and they just got off the road and made it to work. They were like an hour late. And the one woman was like a big holy roller Christian. And the other one, very nice people. They would never come up with this stuff and say the stuff that they did that happened to them. And then there's other things too. You can find out about those women that reported to MUFON. One of them became pregnant, had a child, and dude, just crazy stuff.
Just gets so far out. Yeah.
Oh my God, man.
But when you meet people, it's weird when you meet people that like, it's one thing if I get to like go meet Whitley Strieber and hang out. It's like, okay, but just when it's like some random person who has no, like,
that's right.
Nothing to gain from this kind of thing. It's not, and they're not into this kind of thing at all. And it just really actually, they don't want to talk about it. It disrupts their life.
But yeah, Michelle and I were not interested in this stuff at all. I mean,
I had an ex-girlfriend that said that she saw it was like an engineer, not into any of this kind of stuff at all.
Yeah.
It was like, oh yeah, when I was like, we were in high school, me and my sister and some like cousins were out playing on the beach in like somewhere in Boston or somewhere in New England, and this light just comes in off of the ocean, and just they said it looks like it's looking for something, and they're just like, what? And there's no sound, and then they just like said like, we just got behind rocks, and silly thing. Obviously, this thing could found what if you wanted to, but and then it was gone, and then and that was just because I think I had told my story.
Mm-hmm.
And then when later that sister was like visiting, and I just randomly brought it up without mentioning anything, and she just immediately goes, I don't want to talk about that.
Exactly.
So a lot of people, any stories like that.
Yeah, people don't want to talk about it because of the stigma that's associated with it. And I come to find out with all the people that joined our Facebook group and how we've been doing this show now for like 4 years, and the people we've had on and their stories, it's like this stuff is happening all the time. People are seeing stuff and having things happen to them and experiencing things all the time. Some are good, Some are not so good. A lot of the times I think the ones that talk about they're here for the Galactic Federation and yada yada, and I hear this stuff, uh I think they've had their memories changed. That these I don't think these things are as good as people think they are. They're here for their own agenda and their own devices. If they're even really aliens, I think they
There's
might
so
be
many-
an ancient civilization that's been here.
There could, you never know, like, if something was so advanced and like we came along
Yeah.
later, and it's almost like we're the equivalent of some weird little lemur coming out, like staring like at like
Yeah.
a person driving their Jeep by. They're like, but then you got to wonder too, like, the thing you guys saw is that some like military guy just like fucking with you, like, all right, get out of here. Like,
Here's what I'll say about that. Being a pilot trainee and almost having my pilot certificate, the fact that my father was a United Airlines captain and flew, and I flew with him, and I looked at the FAA regulations and all that stuff. If it is us with new technology and they're playing these kind of games and stuff over major, like, I mean, we're talking Canton probably has
very densely
5
populated.
million people living in it or something ridiculous. It's huge. It's people on top of people here. And you're going to take a craft like that and just have it over.
You're not going to joyride with $1 trillion craft.
Yeah. What if it crashed? Right. And since when don't we have things that we build crash? They do all the time. And, there's all kinds of aircraft accidents and stuff that don't make the news because, 200 people didn't die when it crashed. There's accidents. They run into each other on tarmacs and taxiways. And, some guy made a wrong turn when he wasn't supposed to. They're very careful and everything. But, I mean, dude, come on. If that was, and they're messing with some technology, because after I heard that voice, it was only a few months later that my thyroid went hyperactive. I've never had a problem with my thyroid. I got really, really sick. All my beard, all my hair fell out. My beard and what hair I had left turned white. I mean, and it was in the space of about 10 days that happened. And I lost probably about 25 pounds in that week. And I didn't sleep for like 3 days straight while I'm trying to start teaching a whole new school year. This all hit me at that time. So there was something from that craft that affected me. And now I'm
almost echoes of like when you hear like, no, you can't handle hearing like the voice of God, like
right. Yeah. Yep. And Michelle was a witness to it. So and like I said, I'm a scientist. I'm a earth and space science teacher. I don't deal with this stuff. And then it just fell in our laps, and it just kind of spiraled into what we're doing today. And
but did you ever think you would see like the minority leader of the Congress of the Senate speaking on the floor,
Nope.
saying like, we need to look into this stuff. That's the crazy stuff happening now.
Yeah.
And that's again, like people don't even know this. It's like the third, how close in succession to the president is, Chuck Schumer. I mean, like talking about this and all these hearings happening and
about UAP, and you can see they try to put the cat back in the bag sometimes, and I'm sorry, it's out there, and just what has happened, and now with shows like ours, and there's some other shows that kind of do the same thing we do. They're bigger than us and all that stuff, but that's fine. We're able to give a voice to people and their stories and their experiences, and put it out there for the record, so other people don't feel like, I mean, I've had grown men on here. We've had to stop recording because I've had grown people on here have, almost emotional breakdowns because of their experience. It's been that traumatic they're not all we're aliens and we're here to help you save the planet kind of stuff. And me personally, after what happened to me, I don't buy that. They're up to something, whoever or whatever they are. And I don't necessarily think it's us.
Even if it's literally like, as simple as you don't matter, like, but don't get in my way. I'm doing,
right.
Like that's terrifying,
Yeah, that is terrifying. That in an instant, if they wanted you to be gone, you could just be gone. And there's all those disappearances and stuff that happen to people all the time. And I mean,
it's terrifying. At the same time, it's like I guess it's encouraging, like that. I'm easy for me to say, but that if these things are all out there and exist and we're still here, if they wanted to do something, we would be gone. And it, like the same thing with like the whole ancient disasters and calamities. And I think one reason it's like hard for people to, you show them a picture or you show them all this new evidence that's out there, and it's almost like in Westworld when they show the android the picture of like them, something that breaks their programming. And I know there was a thing where they would show a picture of them in a different time period or something, and they would see themselves and they just go, doesn't look like anything to me. That's what they were programmed to say.
Well, it's like how some people see these things and how other people don't. It's like you're seeing it, your mind is registering it, and your mind is saying, oh, hell no. You're not, nope. Mm-mm.
Yeah. And then but I think the part of the reason some of this new evidence that's out there isn't even listened to is because it's, no one likes to think that could happen again.
Yep.
But at the same time, it's actually encouraging. It's the most depressing and the most encouraging thing ever at the same time.
It's quite the paradox, isn't it?
If things go like this and the timeline goes like this and comes back down and like societies rise and fall, and because it means we're super vulnerable, could happen anytime. And then at the same time, it's like, God damn, we actually are badass. Like we must be so resourceful, and when we need to be so intelligent and so adaptable that these things could have been that bad, and we're still here.
And we could be that badass that these things like observing us to see what we're going to do next. We could be like a form of entertainment. Hey, let's steer in an asteroid again and let's see how many survive this time and what they do next.
You do conservation. If you think a species is going to wipe out, you scoop up some of them and repopulate them and plant them.
Yeah.
And that was another funny idea that story I'll probably just never get around to doing, but it was just one way aliens could take over is they show up and they have the big meeting with all the leaders and they just say, well, we're in charge now. And they're like, what are you going to do if we don't agree? Like, we're just going to stop shooting all the asteroids out of your path. And you're like, what? Wait, what?
What?
And then they just leave. You're like, what do you mean stop? And they're like, oh no, they've been helping us the whole time because they liked this property.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, any upcoming projects or collaborations you're excited about that you got coming up before we head out here?
You talked about Comic-Con.
Yeah, the Comic-Con stuff.
Coming up. So we just leaked this, like got back to the 80s stuff and everything. I leaked a brand new book called The Disavowed. And it's we haven't said anything about it yet. Very soon we'll have a press release coming out with more info leak, and then we have something planned for Comic-Con for that. And that's like, if you're a fan of the G.I. Joe stuff and you also like sort of like flipping that stuff on its head, that's going to be up your alley.
Cool.
There's actually a Facebook group if you look up The Disavowed.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Josh?
Did he end up with storms in the area?
Right at the end there?
Right here? Am I back?
Oh, there you go. There you go.
They don't want you to know about The Disavowed.
Yeah, right. We're shutting it down.
The Facebook fan group, we're going to really also have fun playing with like some of the concepts of like fandom and the nostalgia waves that have happened in some of our marketing. And Arkworld is still available. Can't say when the next one's coming out, but I am starting to work on another similar thing called The Breakaways.
Okay.
Which people can sort of conclude what that might be about if they're into this sort of subject matter. And again, I'd be thinking of all of this real information that we have now to put into these stories. And
awesome.
Mostly supernatural, sci-fi, fun, dark action stuff with some comedy thrown in is my jam.
All right, cool. All right, well, Josh, I'll tell you what, man, we're gonna have you back on where we just literally, now everybody's familiar with you, and we get the audio out there and stuff. We got to get you to come back on, and when you get another like major project release, and we can focus more on the supernatural stuff, your research into it, and UFOs some more, and and God only knows after you've talked to us what might happen here in the near future. We've gotten some weird stories of things that happen. I get an email a few days later from some people, and they're like, "You won't believe we had a visit, or we had black helicopters flying over, or stuff like that." So anything's possible. Your next story.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us tonight, man. And we appreciate it, and have a good night.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Take care.
Yeah, no problem.
Have a great night.
All right, everybody. Well, that was cool. Started off totally different than what we normally do.
I know we had some of our audience in chat.
Yeah. Well, and it's a very, I was expecting more like, 30, 40 people in chat again and watching the show, but I remembered it's 4th of July week.
Yeah, a lot of people are traveling right now.
A lot of people are traveling and stuff. So with that being said, Diane says, great show. Thanks, Diane. Glad you liked it. Glad you're here. But Michelle, I think it's time for us to get out of here. What do you think?
Yeah, we're going to call it a night, folks.
Yes, we are. So remember, everybody, keep your eyes to that
sky.